As a childling, I was in love with reading. But not books, particularly. I learned to read through Super Mario Galaxy, a game that didn't require me to read, but clearly had a story it wanted to tell that I could not comprehend as a 5-year-old. I was so in love with this game as a kid that I locked in and taught myself written language. This opened up a whole new world of experiences for me. The oceans of Moby Dick, the great adventures to be had in Mordor. I could have scoured the sewers of Derry, or taken an eternal trip to the Overlook. Instead, I read Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Over and over and over and over again. I would go back to the Diary of a Wimpy Kid series, refusing to move on to something with more depth. And trust me, I tried. Geronimo Stilton bored me to death. I loved Hatchet, but hated the second book. I even tried Greg's mentally deficient cousin, Flat Stanley. In the end, I would always stick with the dysfunctional, narcissistic, and beautifully illustrated adventures of Greg Heffley. And when new books came out, it was an event. Until the long haul. The movies were absolute blockbusters, and super entertaining, heartfelt films in their own right. While at times they could feel like watching people have fun movies for kids to project themselves onto because, well, they are, there's also some really good writing within each installment, especially Rodrick Rules. The actors are perfectly casted too. There's a reason #NotMyRodrick popped off upon the reveal of the Long Haul movie. Despite the fourth movie being a separate canon to the first three, audiences fell in love with the actors' portrayals of these characters. My favorite performance comes from Steve Zahn, who plays Frank Heffley, a psychotic murderer who just can't get his darn kids to man up. What? Come on, you see it, right? It's all over the trilogy. Alright, allow me to enlighten you with everything we know about Frank Heffley. I won't be counting the books as canon, just like I won't count the animated movies or the Long Haul as canon. We'll just be looking at the film trilogy with the original cast. Frank's first scene is inherently aggressive. Frank confronts Greg, making a noise in the kitchen with a golf club, then tries to calm himself down when Susan walks into the room. This is the first of many code switches for Frank. Now, this is like a normal reaction to hearing a loud clattering noise in the middle of the night, but it's nonetheless quite the introduction.
I heard he got his butt kicked at wrestling. And what is wrong with you? Why would you sign up for something you don't have to do?
Well, Greg, I think it's great that you took the initiative to learn something new. This is like the first step to responsibility. My boss's son, Will, was smaller than you, but he built himself up with the weights.
Frank shows envy at his boss's son for being more masculine than Greg, encouraging his son to pursue wrestling and fitness. This shows us that Frank is unsatisfied with his kids, since he doesn't feel Rodrick is very demonstrable, and so far neither is Greg. This is reinforced later when Frank shows disdain for Rodrick's eyeliner, and way more in the following films. Rodrick is a few years older than Greg, and already an adolescent, so this is pretty much what he'll be like as an adult. And it disappoints Frank. Rowley later points out in the third movie that Greg's parents are used to being disappointed in their kids, so it's not just Frank who sees it.
Oh, Frank, honey, can you go with them?
No, I can't. I gotta guard the house. In case someone tries to TP us, they're gonna get drenched from the roof.
Honey, for goodness sakes, don't do that again. Remember what happened last year?
Despite the horrors of last Halloween, Frank stays at home instead of watching his kid to engage in petty prank wars with the kids of the neighborhood. Crazed laughter, combined with Frank's fascination with the Civil War, implies that he thirsts for conflict. And that he's kinda unhinged. Immediately after this flashback, he starts making excuses to Susan about why he's doing this from the roof. It's clearly just a battle strategy, but the whole family just accepts this flimsy Walter White-esque excuse and allows him to move on upstairs. This shows me that the family is easy to fool. I mean, we see this a lot throughout the trilogy. They lie to each other constantly. He drenches Greg and Rowley in a mysterious acidic goo that I assume was meant to kill them. Luckily, not this time.
My dad got me a weightlifting set.
Frank got Greg a weightlifting set for Christmas. His desire for a masculine son is pretty apparent.
Why can't you ride and I throw at you first? My legs kind of hurt from walking over here.
Frank's flimsy excuses rub off on Greg. Susan is a pretty honest person throughout the trilogy, for the most part, so I assume Greg learned to lie through Frank, since if he learned it from Rodrick, you can guess who Rodrick learned it from. One of Frank's nicer scenes is when Greg calls him to pick him up when he gets stranded at Fregley's house. He hugs Greg, perhaps thankful he isn't like Fregley.
Your son's in a play.
Yeah, sure. It's not wrestling, but at least it's something.
Stop ruining the play like you ruin everything else!
I thought Dorothy deserved it.
Thanks, Dad.
You get some good shots in there.
Frank is disappointed in Greg's pursuit of theater, but not in his violent retaliation against Patty. Interesting.
Invitation for the mother and son sweetheart dance.
I knew you didn't want to miss that.
Looks like a lot of fun.
I think you should go. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
Frank tries to get Greg out of the house with Susan so he can presumably play with his murder dolls. It's established here that Frank loves playing with army men and Civil War models, though in the books, this is a much bigger part of his character. This is in direct contrast with his masculinity push towards Greg, and could only possibly be because he wants some alone time. The first movie establishes that Frank Heffley feels disappointed and stuck in his mundane life as an office worker, especially with such underachieving modern kids. He has it all: a nice house, a pretty wife, 3 healthy kids, and yet Frank is only happy when either he or his kids are dominating. He loves to be in control of a battle, as shown by his fascination with the Civil War, and with dunking on the trick-or-treaters. And he loves violence. He craves a break from the monotony of the world. And in the sequel, I think he gets it. Susan asks Frank if he remembers when they used to actually do stuff together as a couple. Have parties, dance, pop Molly. No, Susan and Frank are Gen X. They did meth. Raw. Anyway, Frank seems oddly horrified by her dancing, as if he's been shocked. Or in shock, maybe? Either way, this shows that his love life is also quite lacking despite how nice of a wife Susan appears to be.
Greg Heffley, this is your mother. Everything is going to be okay.
In contrast with his character in the last movie, Frank goes along with Susan's idea to save Greg from the punk skate, humiliating his son by carrying him bridal style out of there. This reads to me like Frank just does it to please his wife and get it over with, as if he's on autopilot. Susan is a very my way or the highway type of parent who's self-absorbed in her own right. It's possible that even parenting his children is a luxury Frank cannot take. We do learn a lot about how emasculated he feels by movie 3. Maybe this is another way that manifests?
Okay, hold on, wait a second. I need a moment for a family meeting. Now, your father and I have been talking.
Here, Susan says, "Your father and I have been talking," but Frank doesn't seem to remember this conversation at all. He looks very awkward around the family, and impatiently waits for his wife to stop talking so he can leave. Susan's musings, the front page, reads, "We've become a culture that looks at confessing as a weakness, rather than the more virtuous action. I suspect, as parents, we are partially to blame, if not totally. If our child is caught and confesses, it is so simple to reprimand them and forget that in some small part, we should also be rewarding them for telling the truth. Why should they be honest when it gets them punished? This isn't evidence of anything, but I found it ironic that this text both foreshadows Greg and Roderick's arc later, and hints at the parents hiding stuff too. Frank is hiding something from his family, most likely Susan in particular, which is why she wrote the parents' part in the first place, most likely venting by jabbing her husband subtly. As I said before, she's self-absorbed. I kind of doubt she's blaming herself here. There's a passage here about Frank hosting a poker game, too.
My computer was supposed to be for homework only. You lied to me. And you know how I feel about that.
Mom, from now on, I'll be 100% honest.
When Susan addresses Greg's lie, Frank gives a devious little smirk towards his son. He actually seems quite proud of Greg here. I wonder why. Frank has to deal with Susan's complaining for the rest of the week after Greg and Roderick fight at church. He seems more annoyed and bored. He then tells his sons not to have anybody over, which seems to be a house rule and not anything devious, like he dug someone under the basement or something. During vacation, Frank is exhausted and bored, laying on the bed while his son plays with him. Does he not want to be on vacation? Or maybe he's just tired.
You are in so much trouble.
Me? You lied to Mom just as much as I did, and you know how she feels about lying. She's gonna kill both of us.
Now, this is just one of Greg's silly little cartoon ideas animated for the audience, but I do find the framing of this image striking when Frank is wielding the shovel, and the Grim Reaper is looking his way. It was just Susan that was gonna kill them. Why would Frank be holding the shovel? Frank immediately suspects something is wrong when he returns home. He grills Greg and Roderick in a very scary way.
So, you guys just hung out? Had a good time together, huh?
Yeah, actually, yep. I never thought I'd admit this, but we had a pretty good time together.
This guy feels somewhat different from the checked-out, albeit neurotic man from the first movie. It feels like there's a lot underneath the surface that's causing him to have these odd, crazy tendencies. Frank discovers one of his figurines misplaced and freaks out. Very strange behavior, but to be fair, these are very valuable to him. Still, the way he yells is strangely aggressive.
Look, don't! These are off limits! No touch! They are not toys! They're figurines! I can't.
Shit gets serious. Roderick invited over his guitarist friend, who is a total slob, after lying to Frank about him being professional. Frank decides to finally take control over his family, and more importantly, his sons. He forces Roderick to stay at the table with Bill.
So, Bill, Roderick tells me that you're a professional musician, so that means that you earn enough to make a living?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, enough if you live in your parents' basement. First of all, there's no home-cooked meals like this.
What? Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
No, on the road, it's all burgers and fries and pizza. Then you gotta deal with the fans, especially the girls. Yeah. No, it's definitely not for everyone.
When it backfires, he stabs a piece of pot roast in frustration. Violent. Frank falls asleep during date night with Susan. He asks,
You picked the housekeeper over the supermodel?
I know.
in regards to the movie they're watching. Yikes. This time, Frank is more guarded and annoyed at Greg, rather than supportive. Probably because instead of hurting Rowley, he got scared by a horror movie. That's chick shit, obviously. Susan's musings. Big Mom is watching. So interesting. Could this be the film winking at the audience about Frank's devious off-screen actions? Are the police getting suspicious now? I know it's not anything direct, and it's not particularly shown in the movie, but it's fun to look for small little hidden theming details like this. For me, at least. Frank tries to force the boys to clean the car, but Rodrick gets out of it by doing it badly, breaking Frank's visage of power over his kids. He is floundering. Frank has been doing his own son's homework for him since he was in middle school. He's so ashamed of Rodrick, he has to project himself into his work just so his family doesn't look bad. Well, so he doesn't look bad. Frank is disgusted seeing Greg follow in Rodrick's footsteps. Greg is right in saying that he thinks his father believes the entire legacy he's jizzed out will become like Bill. And that is all too common. He doesn't want chuds, he wants chads. Frank shows support for Susan during dinner with her editors. It's sweet, though it's hard to tell if he's prideful of her or just smiling passively. Frank is ecstatic to show Susan's editor some oddly personal Civil War reenactment photos. Makes me think she's not the only self-absorbed parent of the two. Then he discovers Rodrick's party and is betrayed to find out that Susan went behind his back and lied with Greg about the door.
Greg, you told me it was a couple of kids. A band rehearsal.
Wait, Susan, you knew about this?
Yes, I knew.
You knew about this, but you didn't tell me about it?
I haven't been able to look at that bathroom door for 2 weeks.
I knew that door had a lock on it! And everybody was trying to make me feel like I was losing my mind!
He flips out and embarrasses the family. Frank and Susan ground the boys. Frank doesn't allow Rodrick to perform in the talent show, specifically to stop his career from taking off. Frank obsessively asks if Greg could ever parade himself around for the military. It's the most enthusiasm he shows all movie, and rest assured we'll be getting much more of this side of him next film. When Rowley throws out a seemingly dead dove, Frank is the only member of the audience not disgusted, but intrigued, leaning in to get a better shot with his camera. What the fuck? Frank ends his arc by lying to Rodrick about his success.
He's happy, she's happy. I say we keep this one between the two of us, okay?
So ironic. With twice as much Frank content as the first movie, Rodrick Rules establishes that Frank has lost control of his family, has more anger issues than he ever showed to have in the first movie, is more apathetic than he was in the first movie, and seems to have a fondness for death. Not just the glory and the glamorization of war the American government loves to propagandize, but death in general. He's lost passion in his marriage, he's more impulsive and has less agency overall. He's a hypocrite. And that will be explored lots in the final installment.
No.
But I'm so close to getting the...
Summertime is for real games, not video games, okay?
Frank refuses to let Greg play Twisted Wizard on his PSP while the family is at the pool. This is because Sony ponies aren't allowed in this Microsoft Master Race house. Frank is fascinated by Lenwood's transformation from alternative rebellious punk to perfect blonde prep. Frank registers conservative America as the picture of masculinity, probably from all the propaganda he's been spoon-fed. Frank's been harder than usual on Greg about rules around the house, and has outright refused to let him play video games during the daytime in summer. We also learn that Frank's favorite things include fishing, sports, Civil War, camping, and hiking, all very apple pie and Chevrolet. Greg thinks they have nothing in common, and has been hiding from him lately. He is not correct, but also correct on a surface level. Frank doesn't actually care about any of this stuff, except for Civil War. He just pretends to, so he seems more masculine. Frank is so busy, he doesn't even remember to put a picture for his son in his yearbook. He works the most boring job ever. How could he forget such a thing for so long and then have the gall to use such an embarrassing picture? I thought he cared about how his family looked. Maybe that's faded. Maybe the events of Rodrick Rules have left him apathetic.
Our neighbors, the Warrens, have kids that are your typical outdoorsy type. That's okay, but my dad has this crazy idea that physical exercise is normal. And those guys are setting a bad example.
Frank seems to be disrespected by men around the neighborhood. He's envious and resentful of his kids, specifically Greg and Rodrick. Though later, when Susan can't find Manny's blanket, Frank is ready to let it go and start letting Manny man up. Later, it's revealed that Frank threw it out on purpose, so that Manny could man up and avoid becoming like Rodrick.
What? Look at this garbage.
My dad and I don't agree on anything, except for the comic Lil Cutie. We both hate it.
The one thing Greg and Frank bond over is hating on a wholesome, cheesy family comic about loving your father. I'm sensing some daddy issues from both parties. Greg is an insane man who plays the same game cross-platform, not keeping any of his save progress. Twisted Wizard must be like sex. This has nothing to do with anything, I just thought this was funny.
Congratulations, player, all your hard work has paid off. You're now a level 9 necromancer.
You played video games all day.
Me? No.
The DVD of the cable box go into the DVD? Does the DVD play go into the cable? What, you think this is funny?
It's amusing.
No video games and no television for the rest of the summer. Does that make you laugh out loud?
Dad, no!
I stopped laughing. I stopped.
Ha! Guess who's the laugher now? Me! I'm the laugher! I'm the laughingest laugher that ever laughed! Ha ha ha!
Frank throws a fit after being lied to by Greg, unplugging video games and TV for the rest of the summer. He's the craziest he's ever been. He mocks his kids after Rodrick laughed at him. Then he tries to go downstairs to escape his family and paint his murder dolls. Susan gives him a good talking to because she's the goat of the family. But Frank doesn't even want to try to hang out with Greg until she brings up his absent father. Frank's absent father, not Greg's. Frank drags Greg out of bed and takes him fishing. He takes Greg to a far-out fishing spot where he reflects. This is what it's all about. Spending quality time together. Until Greg knocks the bait into the water. Then it's not. I think Frank was just pretending to like fishing, as revealed later on in the movie, so he wouldn't be like his dad. It feels like Frank's attempts to bond with Greg are more so done out of spite than an actual attempt to get along. He's angry the whole time, loud and annoying in the morning, and condescending during the bonding sessions. Luckily, Frank doesn't cosplay a Confederate. He'd rather play the side that won anyways. It has nothing to do with morals. Frank doesn't even want to hang out with his pathetic loser kid. He just does it so he doesn't feel like a shitty dad, even though he kind of is one. In a fantasy sequence, Frank walks in from the right, where a fucking corpse is sitting. There is no way there are this many death references around Frank Heffley, and it's just a coincidence. I get it, the guy got bored so he died, or he's been there so long he died, but come on! That framing is insane! Also, Frank signed Greg up for an internship at his job. When Greg lies about having a job, Frank is actually earnestly happy about it. Someone around here finally did something, he says.
And I went to the manager, and he hired me. He said he liked my pluck.
Wait, you actually got a job?
Yeah, but I can call him and tell him I can't do it if you...
No, that's fantastic! Can you believe it, Susan?
No.
Our son got himself a job!
I know.
Somebody around here actually did something.
Frank and Susan force their kids to go to this very patriotic 4th of July party, because of course they do. Frank has to lie to Stan, who is this ultra-masculine, picturesque father figure he knew since they were kids, just to feel like an equal. And then he gets humiliated over having his arm broken during a trip they went on as kids. Stan thinks very little of Frank. Scratch that. The world thinks very little of Frank.
Broke my arm in 2 places.
Cried the whole time.
Yeah, hurt.
In a desperate attempt to give his kids responsibility, Frank gets the kids a dog. Like most killers, Frank cares about the dog more than both of his kids. Shit, I meant all 3. How did I miss Manny?
Only the very best get to be part of this troop.
Oh, it's so great to be back here, Troop Master Barrett.
Now, you boys get yourselves a uniform, and the first thing you're gonna do is clean out that musty old storage locker.
Oh. Oh, really? Okay.
Throughout the film, we're shown that Frank is legit seen as worthless scum by everyone in his life. It seems like his desire to have a masculine, dominating, winning family derives from this powerless life he's led.
Your father and I have something that we want to give you.
You showed us that you're responsible enough to have one.
Yeah.
Your own cell phone.
Are you serious? My own cell phone?
Yeah.
It is despite Frank's desire to man his children up that he continues to treat them like children. He gets Greg a phone, but it's a baby phone that only calls home and 911. This makes Greg feel like a baby, and then continue to act like one. Frank wants his kids to just come out of teenagehood full-grown, responsible, strong-hearted adults, but he needs to actually parent them to get that result.
If that dog does anything to Tingy, slow.
Frank mentions already being in trouble with Susan over his behavior lately. Looks like marital issues haven't slowed down since the sequel.
Is that dog spit?
How could there be so much?
You boys have barely touched your pot roast.
Are you kidding? I'm stuffed.
And I filled up on vegetables.
More for us then.
Frank and Greg lie together. This isn't the first lie Frank's delivered, or even shared with Greg, but it does show us that they're not too dissimilar, foreshadowing the resolution of the film. Instead of barging in and being rude, Frank proudly watches Greg sleep, and then offers to drive him to work. This leads to Frank finding out Greg's lie, and being absolutely devastated by the discovery. Greg states life won't be worth living if his dad finds out. This is because he fears what Rowley told him earlier, that he's disappointed his father his whole life. The one time Frank had higher expectations of Greg, he blew it. Frank is just empty after this discovery. From this point onward, Frank seems broken, like his legacy is completely done for. This, right here, is the most damning piece of evidence yet. Fregley tells a campfire horror story, while Frank watches as he plays with a carving knife. Frank keeps eye contact with Fregley almost the entire time, then gives a genuine smile after the boys get scared. The story is about a scout leader chopping off his own hand. The campers run away in fear and then decide to go back to camp to help him, since he was helping them. But when they get back, his body is gone, but his hand was left. None of the boys were ever seen again. Frank then enters Greg's tent later that night and gets swatted with a mallet in his hand as a horror movie stinger plays.
What the heck?
Ah! Why'd you do that?
Do what?
Hit me in the hand with a mallet!
Me?
Yeah, you with the mallet in your hand?
I can't stop making you mad at me.
You cannot make this shit up. This is the movie telling us Frank is a killer. It's revealed that this was a story that's been passed down for generations, even back when Frank was a kid.
I remember the muddy hand from when I was a boy. You can't beat the classics.
The story is essentially about a man who keeps hurting himself, which affects the children he cares for. They run from him, but decide to come back in order to help him because they recognize he was always trying to help them. They find him gone, only a trace of him left, and then he presumably kills them. Greg feels awful that he can't stop making his father mad at him. Frank admits that everyone messes up, including him, only he's not afraid to admit it. This implies his murdering is not a flaw at all. He's proud of his work. He could never admit it to his family, but he really has no regrets about the people he's hurt. He's dominating. Why would he be ashamed? Only, Frank is deeply ashamed of his fuck-ups, and knows he's fucked up in raising his kids. So, this is partially a lie, keeping on track with the whole Greg and Frank aren't exactly too dissimilar theme the movie's been trying to push.
Did you see their tents? They weren't even arranged in formation. What a bunch of losers.
Come on, son. Now, a troop is only as good as its leader. Any troop that would let Frank Heffley be assistant troop master is bound to be weak. Now, there's two types of people in this world. Predators and prey. Frank Heffley is a wounded gazelle.
Fucking wow. What an informative, ironic line. In an effort to avenge his father, Greg plans an assault on the rival campsite. When it fails, Greg finally tells the truth.
I did it.
Greg, no!
Dad, it was my idea. And I can't let them take the fall from me.
We didn't mean to burn up the tent.
No, but we did.
Greg was only doing it to defend your honor. Mr. Warden disrespected you. He called you a wounded gazelle.
Your boy should be expelled. You know, he's a disgrace to every wilderness explorer all over the world.
Shut up, Stan! Just shut up!
Frank doesn't really care that Greg finally told the truth. He cares more about degrading Stan and how good that feels.
A TV? Pre-tied knots! Stan, you're a phony. So much for the big camper.
I'm going to report this to the Wilderness Committee. We'll see who looks ridiculous then, huh?
Frank finally admits hating the normal people conservative shit he's been forced to like to be manly to Greg after they've gone to a hotel. He calls Greg a great kid, and even tells them they're a lot alike. He's proud of him by the end of the film, even if not much has really changed. For the entire trilogy, Frank has been hiding behind this veil of toxic masculinity. He LARPs his interests to look like a strong man, despite being a pretty normal guy, and at the end of the day, his greatest pleasures come from the ways he can dominate other people. When he finally realizes his kids, especially Greg, are just like him when he was young, he loosens up and realizes that pretending is the problem. He learns to drop the American patriot angle and just let his kids be. They'll fuck up their childhood, but they can be miserable adults one day just like him. That boy ain't right, but what boy is? He certainly wasn't. And Frank is a deeply disturbed individual. Now that we've covered what the movies directly tell us, let's go over all the evidence towards my theory. As a child, Frank Heffley had an emotionally unavailable father who sent him off to camp and refused to bond with his son. The other boys considered Frank a pathetic bitch and mocked him behind his back, especially after he broke his arm and cried all trip. He now views emotional people as weak after this event. His father clearly thought the same.
You always complained that your father never spent enough time with you when you were young. Now you're doing the same thing. Be the father you wish your father had been.
Frank heard a story about the muddy hand at camp, and it struck a chord with him. Frank grew up with a fascination for death, murder, and conflict. The Heffleys are from a fictional town in Massachusetts, so he was on the winning side of the Civil War, giving him a fascination with that war. He also began to assimilate himself into the man his father, and the world, wanted him to be. A patriot who did all the things your atypical 50s dad type would do. Fish, play poker with the guys, work an office job, be in nature, and start a family. He meets Susan when he's a young adult, and they have a fun, adventurous party lifestyle together up until she gets pregnant with Rodrick. Rodrick is a dull kid with a passion for the arts. Greg is a wimpy kid, with no passion at all. Frank sees himself in both boys and pushes them to become the kind of man his father could be proud of. Franklin Heffley, Frank's father, is in the movies and lives in a retirement home. He spends most of his time watching the security cameras and playing board games that remind him of the good old days. But he's still involved in Frank's life, coming to the 4th of July party and dog days. Frank has resentment for his father, hence why he's in a home, but he still craves approval from him, so he can't just abandon him. Still, he sends Greg and Rodrick to live with him for a weekend as a punishment. That's pretty telling. And I have a little theory that Franklin watching the monitors as a form of entertainment is lampshading the fact that he was a pretty strict father, despite not being there at all. Susan is a controlling parent and takes over primary parenting duties. Frank tries to show both Rodrick and Greg the way, but they are unreceptive. They mirror Frank, a pair of lying, wimpy kids who just want to have fun. But since Frank views himself as weak, he pushes them to be more masculine. It doesn't work. He projects his need for dominance on his figurines, since Susan won't like it if he projects it onto the kids. He even engages in prank wars with kids on Halloween. When he sees Greg assault Patty during the play, it fills him with pride, and when there's an opportunity for him to be all alone to play with his Civil War guys afterwards, he pushes Greg to do it in spite of what a girly activity a mommy-son dance is. He doesn't care. He just wants to pretend to kill people. One day, between movie 1 and 2, inspired by the horror story from his childhood and these newfound gratifying feelings, Frank kills someone. It's the greatest thrill of his life. With the allusions to decapitating limbs in movies 2 and 3, I'm willing to bet that the method of which he kills people is by cutting off their limbs. He kills one or more persons, and is zoned out by the intro of movie 2. This is why he's so checked out and spacey in the first half of Rodrick Rules. Susan catches on to Frank's suspicious behavior, but he refuses to confess that anything is going on, leading to Susan angrily writing about his secretive behavior in her column. While he engages in his murders, he continues to put up a facade of manliness to his colleagues, and allows Susan to parent the kids her way. That is, until the vacation. Knowing that Rodrick and Greg are lying about having invited people over from the jump, because it's exactly what he would do in their situation, he immediately becomes angry and accusatory of them upon coming home and seeing no obvious evidence of a party. Here, he's projecting his own fear of being caught in his lies on Rodrick and Greg, which is why he's so manic about it all. Greg invites over Rowley to watch The Foot with him, a horror film about a foot that terrorizes a couple who come to live in its residence. Rowley has to be picked up after being too terrified to sleep over, and Frank is disappointed in Greg for this. Even though Frank usually encourages Greg's more masculine, violent interests, this time he is disappointed because Greg was afraid of the movie instead of excited about it. When Rodrick invites Bill over, Frank is disgusted at the idea of his kids becoming like him. After the dinner scene, he goes out and kills again, evident by the frustrated way he stabs the food at the end of the scene. Also evident by how he tries to force his kids to clean the car, and becomes more authoritative going forward in general. He wants control and power over more than just people's lives behind his family's back. He wants to be respected by them. But in the end, even Susan stops respecting him and lies to him about the door. When he finds out, he is devastated and pulls the plug on Rodrick's loaded diaper performance in an attempt to kill his career and save his kid from becoming another Bill. Also as a form of control. At the talent show, Frank encourages Greg to become an American-loving patriot, maybe even trying to push him into going into the military, a fear Greg has by movie 3. But by the end of the movie, Frank gives up on Rodrick and lies with Greg about Susan stealing the show from him. Frank takes full control over the house at this point, as another year passes and he has yet to be caught by the police. In fact, nobody would ever suspect the wounded gazelle, Frank Heffley, to ever harm a hair on a person's head. So, he becomes a dictator of a parent, refusing to let Greg game inside or outside, banning TV for the summer just because Rodrick laughed at him, throwing out Manny's blanket so he can grow up faster, treating his kids like shit until Susan finally confronts him and gives him a reality check, reminding him that he's turning out just like his own father. In an attempt to dodge these accusations, he half-assedly tries to bond with Greg, all while other kids and parents keep upstaging him and his family. When Greg lies about getting a job, Frank sees a glimmer of hope. Really? Maybe Greg can still be saved. This makes Frank fall back on old habits, allowing Susan to be more in control of the primary parenting and babying Greg by giving him a baby phone on his vacation. He and Susan don't see Greg as an adult yet, and treat him like a kid, even though they both want him to be a mature, masculine man already, leading to Greg just going back to his childish behavior. Greg only acts like a kid because his parents treat him like a kid. And, well, I mean, he is just a normal kid, too. It's okay for him to act childish so long as his parents adjust their methods as he grows up, instead of giving him a ladybug flip phone with only 2 numbers on it in the 8th fucking grade. Frank is crushed when he finds out that Greg never had a job at the country club. Greg feels like a disappointment, and even talks about how a life where his father truly is disappointed in him isn't a life worth living. Greg is falling into his father's trap, a trap he doesn't even know he's set. But in the end, Greg sticks up for his father by pranking Stan and standing up for him in front of the very people who've been shaming him his whole life, in the very campgrounds where he was first treated like prey. Like I said, Frank doesn't feel shame for his actions, and he doesn't feel ashamed of his son. He just had to realize that the facade he's lived his whole life is a bad one. His arc ends on Lil Cuties, the comic strip he and Greg bond over hating, coming back with the son taking over for his father, which is to say that Greg may just turn into another Frank someday. As twisted as this ending is, I did find the anti-patriarchy message quite nuanced for a summer fun movie about a book my teachers lambasted me for reading so often. Frank might be a killer, but at least he'll be a better parent after this. I encourage everyone who's watched this video to go back and watch the Diary of a Wimpy Kid movies, the original movies, with this interpretation in mind. Who knows? You might find stuff I missed. Plus, they are really great.